What's up, guys? We are nearing completion on the 924S. Last episode, you saw it go down on all four wheels, air down for the first time, and back out of the shop for the first time. What I didn't film was the first drive. I wished I had, but it was after dark, and I really wanted to film it during the day. I'm starting the episode off telling you guys that this car exceeded my expectations on drivability and handling. This thing rides so well. I honestly am blown away at how well this thing rides. Dual bellow bags front and rear with front and rear sway bars was the move. And the work involved to get dual bellow airbags in the rear of these cars was totally worth it. So to bring everyone back up to speed, we are under a major time crunch to get this car done and ready to drive the 3 hours to Helen, Georgia in just 2 or 3 days for Alpine Volks Fair. We still have a ton left to do on this car. And the most concerning and serious of those things is I have to get this wheel off and get it back over to my friend Perry's shop and dismount that tire because for some reason it's leaking. The sealing job I did just wasn't good enough. All the other three are holding just fine, but this one's leaking from the face to the lip. And so somewhere in here it isn't sealed up properly, or one spot just didn't get covered well enough. And I think after all the years of 3-piece and 2-piece wheel building, that's the first wheel I've had leak. So I'm getting right to it. Got to get that off right now and get over to Perry's shop so I can get that tire off. I can bring the wheel back here, reseal it, retorque the bolts, make sure everything's good. Just kind of go over it, make sure I didn't miss anything. Let the sealant set back up, and then tomorrow is when I can remount tires once the silicone has set up. So we are unfortunately not able to drive this car today, but what that'll allow me to do is get it back on the lift. We're going to work on tucking the rear bumper. We're going to work on the heck blend, which that still needs to be restored and refurbished. We are back from Perry's shop with a tire dismounted. Man, that's just the worst. That's just the worst for when you're leaving for a show in 2 days and you don't have a tire machine in your shop. Time to work on so many other things on the car now that it's hung up on the lift. And we got to figure out where this thing was leaking from. I think it may have simply just been silicone. The way these half-inch lips mount, where the stem hole is, the valve stem hole, is real close. And I had to cut around it in order to get it to where I thought it would seal well. And I'm hoping I just cut too much around it. This one isn't the prettiest seal job. Normally I lay tape and whatnot, but since I was working with a lot of curvatures, you couldn't get tape to lay flat. Anyway, we're gonna look at this real hard and make sure there's no cracks anywhere because it could very well be leaking from a crack. And that's worst case scenario. That's not what we want to see. That's the car not going to Helen on these wheels at this point with the time we have. Everything looks pretty good. I don't see any cracks. I'm hoping it's literally just the silicone right there. So leaving that stem on, I'm just going to silicone around it and pray that that's all it was. And I'm going to do that next so we can start to let that set up. And so by tomorrow morning, we're good to put a tire on it. Now, here's the other problem. And FedEx, man, FedEx has been just the absolute worst. Bag Riders overnighted me some management parts a week and a half ago. Those are lost, completely lost. The other two brand new 20540s were supposed to be delivered this morning. They're still showing that they're 2 hours away, and that hasn't changed in the last 3 days. So I don't think I'm getting tires today. I was really hoping that was the case because by tomorrow, when that silicone set up, we'd be taking the used tires off the Corvair Epsilons and putting brand new tires on it and going to Helen with brand new tires all around on the Porsche. All right, guys, I resealed the whole wheel. We went right over everything I already did, and I kind of caked a bunch of silicone around the base of the stem, which I don't think will be completely necessary, but I did anyway because I think that's where it was leaking because there's no signs of any cracks. I torqued all the bolts back down again. They only went about another quarter turn because I torqued them all to spec originally and just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss like a whole row of like 4 or something, and it separated the sealant when I inflated the tire or when I put the tire on. So there's nothing obvious showing. I think it might have just been the silicone around the stem I cut too tight. Because basically I siliconed the whole wheel up, and then before I put the stems in, I went around with a razor blade and kind of notched it for the stem, and that may have been the culprit right there. Either way, Doesn't look like there's any cracks. All the bolts are tight. Everything seems like it's sealed up now. I made sure of that. So that's going to cure for the next day. And now we wait because the car is now hung up on the lift because of it. But while the car's on the lift, we are getting to some important aesthetic pieces. Now, I've talked about this piece on the channel before. I picked this up when I went out to 944 Barn, to my friend Elliot's place. When I originally bought the car, the day I bought the car, I bought the 50130 RSs, but I also picked up a heck blend. And there was a perfect one that he was taking off of a car that was still on his trailer. And if you guys haven't seen the episode, as we were chit-chatting, taking it off, it fell off the car, and instead of falling in between the trailer onto the grass, it caught the edge of the trailer and snapped the corner right off. And so that was just the worst because this heck blend was in otherwise perfect condition. But out of feeling bad, out of feeling terrible, Elliot gave me this pretty rare illuminated heck blend. Now this one here, I love so much more. And not just because it's harder to find, but because it's illuminated, but it also emulates the grid pattern of the taillights. And you'll notice here, by the end of this episode, hopefully you're seeing it on the car, but you'll notice here the grid pattern of the taillights. And basically that heck blend carries that grid pattern all the way across the plate tub to the other side taillight. But this heck blend was spray painted black. I've been thinking about, I don't want to use lacquer thinner. I don't want to use acetone. All that stuff is too hard on plastics. I knew rubbing alcohol was an option. The other thing I wasn't sure of was what lied underneath the paint. Did they sand it? Did they take a Scotch Brite pad to it? Did they take steel wool to it? Is that plastic already scuffed beyond belief and you'll have to basically wet sand it through tons of different grit layers and then polish? I didn't know. But when Andy came over to help me roll the fenders on the Porsche, the rear arches, he had a prep solvent. It's like a prep solvent and a little spray bottle. And before he left, we decided to try it on this heck blend. And this corner came out unbelievable. So basically, underneath was miraculously untouched. They didn't even sand it or anything. They just basically set it down or kept it on the car or whatever and just painted it. And so far, just a third of this grid that we've touched, the plastic is perfect underneath. So I'm hoping that stays consistent across the whole thing. So although there's a little crack in the corner here, it won't be as noticeable once it's in the car, I hope. But this here is the one that's going in the car. Illuminated taillight grid pattern. Super stoked on this. All right, guys, this thing looks completely different. This is unbelievable jump from what it just looked like with all the paint on it. It's not perfect. I really should have like an acrylic or plastic compound to buff it. And honestly, for the state of the taillights, the original taillights in the car, this might be pretty comparable. I'm going to work on the bumper next. Going to pull that off and drill the shocks out. Try to tuck that in as far as possible, just like the front. So the rear, that's up next because this is just not okay. This is not okay at all. If you've seen these cars with the Euro bumpers, it's just barely outside the car. As I'm assuming, much like the front bumper, we're going to remove the bumper, remove the mounts, and then drill the shocks out, press the shocks all the way in, remount. All right, so here's a good comparison of the stock length shock and mount, and then the one I just shortened. All right, guys, so I got the bumper mounts back on. I hammered them in basically as far as they would go. So once we get them on, I've test fit the bumper real quick and then painted them because I ended up having to hammer them harder than I wanted to. They didn't want to go at all. I think the cylinder sleeve was pretty corroded or rusted in there. So hammering them in pretty hard, and it ovalized the holes. So I Dremeled out the holes, and then I ground down the fork because the forks are kind of flared out a little bit and wouldn't fit inside the actual space in the bumper where the bolt ultimately goes through them all. So I ground them all down to smooth them out, Dremeled out the holes so the bolts could go back through. And so I put some paint on them just so it wasn't raw metal. So I'm waiting for those to dry up now before putting the bumper on for the last time. But if you were wondering, at least on a 924, specifically 924S, I've put the bumper shocks all the way in, and that tucked the bumper a solid few inches. All right, guys, so I had some machine screws that were close enough thread to the plastic thread that was on the heck blend, and they kind of cut themselves some new thread as they go down. Putting studs in the back of this is going to be easier to mount it than placing it up against the plate top and then trying to line up bolts from the inside of the car. All right, guys, this was probably, aside from the wheels and suspension, the most extreme change on the car. Between the illuminated heck blend, getting rid of the ugly plate tub, that bumper came in so far, but that is the best compromise if we're not running Euro bumpers. I think we're 2 days after the last clip you guys saw. What I haven't been filming is the absolute nightmare with the other front wheel. It just keeps leaking. So went back to Perry's to dismount the tire, came back here, inspected it, didn't see any cracks. So I blanketed over my silicone with more silicone. I mean, I just went over and above what I needed to do. Let it sit for 24 hours so it properly cured. And in that time, the new tires showed up. So now I had all four 205/40s for the car. So I went back to Perry's in Hal's shop, Quick Everett's, yesterday, mounted the new tires up, put the old tires back on the Epsilon so the Corvair can go back together before I ultimately have to buy new tires for that. And before I left, sprayed it down, and the same wheel was leaking in the same spots. We leave tomorrow morning. It's 10:30 a.m. right now. We leave at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I've put 1 mile on this car, which I haven't filmed. It was at night. It was in the dark. I wanted to film and bring you guys along for its first proper drive, and it looks like that proper drive is probably going to be the 3-hour drive to Helen because we have so much to do. So much to do. I just finished the award bases for Alpine Volksfair last night. This is 1/2-inch thick cherry wood, and basically what happens on this side is a big grill badge gets mounted here. And since I was so late on getting these things done, I told Paul, the promoter of AVF, that I would assemble these in Helen for him. So he's bringing the medallions. I didn't have time to mail them to him before the show. So tomorrow night from the cabin in Helen, I'll be assembling these. But I just got those done, laser engraved, laser cut, sanded. And right now we are about to go to Perry's because yesterday when I came home defeated with this wheel, I disassembled it completely. I took the whole wheel apart. I cut all the silicone out, took all the bolts out, removed the face, removed the lip, barrel, wire wheeled everything up. Wire wheeled the barrel, the face, the lip, all the mounting surfaces, cleaned everything up, and literally sandwiched silicone in here, which I hate doing. I love being like neat and tidy. I mean, the sealant job isn't that bad, you know, from what you see. But I sandwiched sealant on the bolt menu face on the barrel to the face, and then from the face to the lip, and literally squeezed silicone through the bolt holes, and then sealed up the actual inside where the tire is, where the actual air is compressed. So this feels, I don't know, it feels pretty good. It hasn't been 24 hours yet. Oh boy. We are going to see. That still feels a little squishy, but we got to get over there. So that's our next move. Still so much to do that I'd like to do on the car. I washed it yesterday. I literally put a factory wheel on it so I could back it outside and so I could pressure wash it since it was just covered in shop dust. It's been on the lift for a month with all the cutting here in the shop. So I wanted to at least wash it so I can cut and buff it. Now the paint is getting pretty thin. But I just want to do my best to get some of the swirls out of this thing to make it look a little bit better. I need the silicone and clean up some of the hex caps and a few other things. But we're going to go to Perry's. Keep your fingers crossed that we can hold some air in this because I don't know what I'm going to do at this point with the time we have left if that wheel will not hold air. Fingers crossed. It's been a hard push to get to this point for this show. All right, guys, we're at Quick Everett's and we are heading out because this tire is holding air. I almost don't even want to breathe on it wrong or just whisper it. It's holding, guys. The silicone didn't seem like it was completely set up. It's getting real nervous about that it's been about 15 hours. I like to let it sit for at least 24. It's holding, boys. It's holding. We're going to go home. We're going to get that on the car, set it down. Maybe take it for another drive just to shake it down. Make sure any last second things need to be tightened up. We got so much more to do. So we are on the way back to the shop and we're going to pick back up there. All right, guys. Well, what I didn't just film was the last couple hours of buffing the car out. And although I didn't cut it, no paint correction, I just put a polish to it. It reflects light far more than it ever did. So this thing has transformed in an incredible way. So basically, I took 2 hours that I didn't really have to polish this thing out, but it was worth it. It really made a difference.
Why do I do this?
Oh, man.
Oh, man. I did it again. Why?
All right, guys, so Corey made it down. How'd it go?
Not too bad. Yeah, not bad in the truck.
14-hour day at work.
14-hour day at work, no sleep. Packed the rest of my bag up and decided to just hop right in the truck instead of sleeping for an hour or two. I figured that would mess me up more than anything. And yeah, I think 16 hours here, maybe 17 hours.
Yeah, straight. You guys have seen us do this drive a few times on the channel, and never gets any easier, but it becomes routine after a while. So yeah. Almost sundown. So Corey's 190 stayed here after Riverside, and it was parked in the dirt. So this thing's filthy. So he's about to wash it up. Kayla's doing some stuff on her 944. We're going to tinker on that a little bit as well, make sure the alignment's good. And my car is almost ready. There's a few more things I need to do on it. We're also going to drive it. So we got to still drive the car. I've put maybe 1 mile on it since doing the suspension. I'm going to get a small checklist of a few things I need to do on it that are imperative, and then maybe take it up and down the road a few more times before we start packing for the weekend. But Corey's here and tired, as we all are.
Tired is understatement.
Definitely tired. It's been a hard push on this thing too. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this episode. We are just about ready to hit the road for Helen, Georgia, first thing in the morning. We're just fueling up now, getting ready for the drive out first thing. Stay tuned for the next few episodes. Going to try to do a couple over the weekend in Helen, Georgia for Alpine Volks Fair. We're ready. All this work led up to this. Just got to put the center caps in, a few other things, put a few stickers on it, and we are good to go. Also, before we end the episode, I made a couple laser engraved license plate hole block off plates to cover up the holes. I didn't even film any of that. Literally, we leave in a few hours and I'm on the machine right now making one for the front and one for the rear. I had some red acrylic that engraves white, so I figured it was a perfect material for that. So all the work, the last few episodes have led up to this trip. Keep your fingers crossed for us that everything goes well on the nice windy drive into Helen tomorrow. About 2.5, 3 hours. So thank you guys so much for all of the support over the last few episodes. It really means a lot to me. We will see you in the next episode. Also, I forgot to mention this in the episode, and I meant to take you guys along for a ride, but this car handles unbelievably. The whole point of this whole project was to bag one of these cars to lay frame with front and rear sway bars, utilizing dual bellow bags front and rear, and get it to handle like it's on coilovers, and we've achieved it. It handles so well under all speeds. Tomorrow's going to be the real test. The next episode will be the real test because we're going to be driving some real Smoky Mountain style roads all the way out to Helen, Georgia. So we're really going to drive it spiritedly and put it to the test. But so far, the few miles I've put on it, it handles so well. So that's the closing clip. I'd say mission accomplished. Going to make sure I leave you guys an itemized list of the front and rear bags that we used on this car that will work on a 924, 924S, and a 944. Bolt in, not too much cutting, and no welding. So I'll leave you guys with that. Can't wait to see you in the next episode. Can't wait to hang out in Helen, Georgia for the weekend.